welcome to episode 169 of Cinematary. I'm your host, Zach Dennis, and I am here with
Lydia Creech
and Jessica Carr.
And in today's episode, we will be talking about movies we saw this week in part 1, and in part 2, we will be beginning our new series, a series on The Archers, Michael Powell and Emmerich Pressburger. So,
my web search turned something up for us on The Archers, Michael Powell.
What?
Have a look.
Hold on, my Siri's talking to me real quick.
Is this a gag? Are you doing a bit?
All right, we'll leave that in. It'll be nice.
That was amazing.
Yeah.
Very good. I'm glad I was figured out.
Thanks, Siri. All right, so yeah, we're going to be doing a series on The Archers. Our first movie in the series is going to be 1943's The Life and Death of Colonel Blimp. But we'll talk a little bit more about that in part 2. Let's go ahead and dive into part 1. Jessica, you have 2 new releases that you want to talk about. Why don't you first tell us about the bigger blockbustery one?
All right.
Oh, which I'm introing for you. I forgot.
We're supposed to do that.
Because you outsource your intros like Jesse does. Thor Ragnarok. It is the latest in the Thor franchise, the third one. It is directed by Taika Waititi. It's written by like 6 people because it's a Marvel movie, and it stars Chris Hemsworth as Thor, Tom Hiddleston, Idris Elba and Anthony Hopkins return. Cate Blanchett, Jeff Goldblum, Tessa Thompson, Mark Ruffalo, Carl Urban among the new faces in this one. And according to IMDb, imprisoned, the almighty Thor finds himself in a lethal gladiatorial contest against the Hulk, his former ally. Thor must fight for survival and race against time to prevent the all-powerful Hela, Cate Blanchett. I'm going to call it
Kate Blanchett.
From destroying his home and the Asgardian civilization. Jessica, what were your feelings on Thor Ragnarok?
Okay, so I would like to preface this review with the fact that I think that Marvel movies are fine, and I enjoy them, and I'm usually entertained by them. I've seen the Captain America movies, the Avenger movies, all that stuff. But I was most excited for this movie because of my boy, Taika Waititi. And it's really funny because when I was talking to some like Marvel fanboys about this movie before I saw this, a lot of them were like, yeah, like this Thor is going to be funnier than all the rest because it's done by this, I don't know, this like New Zealand director or something. And I like stopped them and I was like, wait a second. Like, it's Taika Waititi. Like, you need to see What We Do in the Shadows. You need to see Hunt for the Wilder People. And so it turned into this whole conversation about why they should go watch other Taika Waititi movies and not really about Thor. But overall, I think that Thor Ragnarok is probably the most genuinely funny of any Marvel movies that I've ever seen. The opening of it is just like, it has classic Taika Waititi humor in it. What's interesting about it is that they have 2 narratives that are going on in the film. So you have kind of the larger narrative with Thor, and Hela comes back, who's apparently his sister, and she's the goddess of death. And she comes back and is trying to take control of Asgard because she wants to conquer more places in the universe. And so you have that kind of conflict going on on the outside. And then the inner narrative is Thor, and he lands on this planet where Jeff Goldblum is the Grand Master, and they have kind of like these Colosseum type fights that are going on. And so there's like conflict in that narrative that goes on. To me, the more interesting narrative of those 2 is the one where they're fighting on the planet, because it is where Taika's humor shines through the most. This isn't really a spoiler because I feel like people have read a ton of articles about it, but Taika does the voice of one of the characters that fights in the Colosseum, and it is hilarious, and he was my favorite character. And probably the most frustrating thing about this movie was the fact that I just wanted to see that character in a standalone movie. I didn't really care about what was happening in the outside narrative with Thor and Hela fighting. And that's probably the number one problem that I had with this, is that it's still kind of stuck to a standard Marvel movie plot with the main story. The ending was super predictable, and at the end of the day, I was less concerned with what was happening with Thor and more concerned with what was happening with Jeff Goldblum on the space planet. So those are kind of my issues with it, but it's super colorful. The costumes are amazing. Space Goldblum is exactly what you would expect it to be. So yeah.
Yeah. I don't know. I feel like I'll have more to. I'm gonna hopefully see this weekend. I think I'll have more to say. I'm curious though to see the balance between the Taika-ness and the Marvel. The standard Marvel stuff that they have to get out of the way. I feel like though. I mean, out of all the movies, though, would you say that this is one of the high points? Not just because Taika is directing it, but also just because that there's this overall jovial, much more laid back quality to it, rather than it being this somewhat self-serious, giant superhero epic.
Yeah, that does make it better, but towards the end, it still does that, Marvel universe thing where it's like hint, hint, like Infinity Stones, Thanos is coming, like that kind of thing. And that, honestly, that got on my nerves because it kind of disrupted, it like took me out of the experience because I was like, I had to think back to other movies and like try to figure out how things were connecting and what this really meant. Because and it was interesting because I saw this movie with Jesse and Andrew, and Jesse has not seen any Marvel movies that are trying to follow the Marvel universe. Like she was whispering me questions during the entire time, and she was like, why are they all dressed up in like old-timey clothes in Asgard? And I was like, are you serious? And then like Doctor Strange popped up and she was like, who is that? I don't even understand. What is going on? And I just had to look at her and be like, Jesse, please, like you have to stop asking me questions. But I still think, she enjoyed the movie the most out of all of us. So I still think that you can watch this movie and enjoy it without seeing all of the other Marvel movies. Like it still makes sense in some way.
Yeah. I don't know. I'm curious to check it out. I'm sure. Again, like I said, I'm gonna see it this weekend, so I'm sure we'll talk about it more then. But yeah,
probably.
Oh, and kudos to Taika for putting in a What We Do in the Shadows reference in a Marvel movie, because that was amazing.
Yeah, very cool. All right, well, let's move to the other new release, but this one vastly smaller in scale. Tell us a little bit about the again, outsource the intro. We're going to talk about the Florida Project.
Yeah, you have to do the introductions. Zach.
I'm sorry, I keep I assume that people will do their own jobs. The Florida Project. The Florida Project is directed and written by Sean Baker. It stars Brooklyn Prince and Willem Dafoe, among others. And according to IMDb, it is set over one summer. The film follows precocious 6-year-old Mooney as she courts mischief and adventure with her ragtag playmates and bonds with her rebellious but caring mother, all while living in the shadows of Disney World. All right, Jessica, take it away.
Okay, so the Florida Project is, overall, it was a very beautiful and really heartbreaking film. Kind of when the film ends, it's one of those films that you have to think about after you leave the theater. The movie takes place at a motel called Magic Castle, so it's just outside of Disney World. And you see Mooney with her mom, and they live out of this motel. Every week, her mom is trying to figure out how to pay for the rent for her to stay at the motel. And Willem Dafoe's character, he's the maintenance manager at the motel, and so you see him kind of like try to do everything that he can to help them out in this situation. I'm always amazed at how Sean Baker can turn ordinary people into just amazing characters that you really want to spend time with. There's something super poetic in how he shoots these characters and how he builds their story. There's a scene where Mooney and one of her friends are passing an ice cream cone back and forth, and it's during the summer, so they're trying to figure out things to do, and they stand at this ice cream stand and they just ask people for money because they don't have any, and they end up buying one ice cream cone and then splitting it between each other. And so they're sitting in the motel and they're just passing this ice cream cone back and forth, and it's dripping because it's super hot. And then it cuts to Willem Dafoe's face, and he's watching them as they're passing this ice cream cone back and forth. And then they spill a drop on the ground, and he's like, okay, you gotta go. You gotta leave. You gotta get out of this lobby. And it was really funny. It was really sweet. There are a lot of colors in this film. The motel where the kids are staying at is painted this pastel purple color. And whenever the kids are just leaning up against the wall of the motel, it makes for a really beautiful shot. I think with this film, I think that Sean Baker is really kind of finding his groove as a filmmaker. I think that he really captured everybody's attention with Tangerine. But I love how his films focus on friendships rather than romantic relationships. I've seen 3 of his movies so far. I've seen Starlet, Tangerine, and now The Florida Project. And all of them have revolved in some way around 2 characters and kind of their intimate friendship. And he's really able to capture the essence of these characters and what makes them work as friends, and I thought that was really great. Mooney as a character, Brooklyn Prince does a really amazing job, but her character is kind of hard because she is a brat. Like, when you get to know her character, she is absolutely terrible. And she is really good at roping the other kids into doing some pretty bad things. But then when you start to spend more time with her mom, Haley, who's played by Bria Vinate, you start to realize that it's kind of a cycle. Like, Haley is also really good at manipulating people to get what she wants, and Mooney has kind of taken on that trait also. And the movie's just really good at capturing, I guess, what a lot of people don't get to see, or it never really comes to the big screen, like these kinds of stories. And a lot of people have compared it to American Honey because it kind of shows you another side of America that a lot of people haven't seen. I think it's really interesting because whenever I went to the theater to see this, I was talking to the concessionist, and he asked me what movie I was seeing, and I said Florida Project, and he was like, yeah, it's so beautiful, it's really great. And he's like, and then you just realize, like, those are real people, this is a real story. And I mean, I guess I knew that coming into it, but I guess for other people, they're not used to seeing people struggle and people who are in poverty. So it's really great that Sean Baker is finding an outlet to showcase their stories.
I feel like the film's pretty universally beloved, at least so far this year. I have seen a couple readings of it that say that it feels like a kind of poverty porn, where it's like this almost idealized, built structured view of poverty that I guess chips away any of the real aspects that people who are in this type of lifestyle, like anything that they actually deal with, and feels more like a, for lack of a better word, Hollywoodized version of it. Do you see that? Do you agree with that? Or do you feel like that's maybe that they're kind of missing, the point of the Florida Project?
Yeah, I feel like they're kind of missing the point because there are consequences for these characters. It's not like they're just, living at this motel and things aren't happening. Like, there are obvious negative consequences that you see with the decisions that Haley is making as a mother and how it's negatively impacting her child. And the ending is a little bit interpretive. I'm not going to spoil anything, but plays off as more of like a dream-like sequence, but there are consequences that do happen. So I don't think it's like making poverty look better in any way.
Okay. No, I kind of, I haven't seen the movie, but I've just seen that interpretation, on Letterboxd or wherever, and I don't know. I feel like that might be, who knows? I feel like that might be they might be missing the boat on the movie, but again, I haven't seen it, so I had no clue. All right, well, the Florida Project.
Good line of questioning, though.
Yeah. The Florida Project, it's in theaters now for in most places, but yeah. The last movie that we're going to talk about is another new release. I caught it last week. It is Call Me By Your Name, the latest film from Luca Guadagnino. His movie from last year was A Bigger Splash with Tilda Swinton and Ray Fiennes. This one comes from a book of the same name by Andre Ackerman, and it takes place in northern Italy in 1983, and it follows the story of Elio, who is the 17-year-old living with his mother and father at this house in Italy. His father, played by Elio's played by Timothy Chalamet. His father's played by Michael Stuhlbarg, and is this kind of an archaeologist, a professor. And every summer he has somebody come and stay with them and help him work on his summer project. And this year, his research assistant is played by Armie Hammer, whose name in the movie is Oliver. And they get feelings for each other, and then stuff happens. the moods of 80s Italy. To overcome them. But yeah, no,
good explanation.
I thought so. No, it kind of takes place over the course of this summer, and these two characters interacting with each other. Elio, like I said, is 17 years old. He's kind of at that middle point between youth and young adulthood, and just kind of having to make much larger decisions. At the time, he has this. It seems like they're friends, but she also is this on again, off again girlfriend. Her name is Marzia, and he's kind of trying to figure out what he kind of wants to do in terms of a relationship with her, but he also seems kind of reticent with that. And then you have this figure, Oliver, who comes in, the Armie Hammer character, and he's instantly just very confident. Guadagnino shoots the kind of the first sequences that you are kind of with Elio interacting with Oliver, and he has this kind of poppy music behind, and they're going about different things throughout the day, whether it's getting breakfast or going into town and visiting different shops. And Oliver is just very. There's no questioning involved. He kind of just does. He does what he wants to do. He picks what he wants to pick, and he moves on. He says what he wants to say, and it doesn't seem like he has much regret, he just kind of he goes about his way in a much different sense than Elio does. And it's kind of, I think that kind of helps with the casting of Armie Hammer. He is this very brooding, very strong, very strong-chested person. He kind of lifts himself over all of the other characters just in terms of his stature, and that's it. Kind of works as a gateway for this character who is very much the same way above both Elio and just the other people that they're interacting with. I think that this one is getting a lot of looks at, as a possible like Oscar movie. I think that it kind of is they're piggybacking it off of the success of Moonlight last year as this other gay drama. But I think that they're also vastly different movies. While while this one definitely has this curiosity and this character kind of understanding and coming to terms with himself. I think that, Moonlight is a much more moody, much more dreamy, much more colorful movie. This one feels, much more. I feel like it doesn't lose itself to those kind of dreamy, hazy moments that Moonlight does. In Moonlight, you have those moments where the light you have this pink and blue light draped over everybody. You have this, this kind of haunting, almost, curious score behind it, and Call Me by Your Name is much more peppy, much more poppy. It moves around in a much different nature. I think it's just it's a completely different movie, and that's kind of it's kind of nice. I liked Guadagnino's movie last year, A Bigger Splash, for the most part. I think it has this third act that it kind of loses you. It completely changes the course of the movie. It kind of has this whole 180 that I didn't really go along with. This one doesn't have it. This is a much happier movie. It's a much breezier movie. You have these kind of side performances by people like Michael Stuhlbarg that are really charming. And the movie itself is charming. It's very lush. It's very European. It's very Italian. It transports you into this time period where, nobody's really accomplishing anything all day. They kind of just lounge around and read and play music and eat fruit, do other things with the fruit. I'll just say, vaguely. But
what does that mean?
You'll see the movie, you'll understand what I'm talking about. There's a scene with a peach that let's just say rivals the American Pie sequence. But yeah, I don't know. I would like to watch Call Me by Your Name again. I think that the first viewing was fine, but I don't know. I wasn't able to connect on all of the different emotional beats that I was wanting to kind of hit me with. I think that Chalamet and Armie Hammer do a fantastic job. There's this very emotional speech that Michael Stuhlbarg gives Timothée Chalamet's character at the end of the movie that honestly should give him some award. I don't know, just give him like the You're a Great Actor Michael Stuhlbarg award, because it's just this very moving speech that he gives that just kind of shakes you a little bit. But yeah, I don't know. I don't think I was 100% behind this movie, but at the same time, I'm not against it. I think I just want another viewing with it. I think that there's still much more to pull from it. But overall, I think it's solid. It should be coming out in the next few weeks, and I recommend it if you really like those kind of lush, those kind of lush European dramas where it just drops you into this, undisclosed place in Italy or France or something, and lets you interact with these characters as they kind of lounge around. If you're into those kinds of movies, Call Me by Your Name is like the epitome of that.
I have a question. Okay.
Do you think that the Swaffords are going to think that this movie is gay enough? Because Jesse's main complaint last year of Moonlight was that it was not gay enough. So, do you think that Call Me by Your Name is gay enough?
Well, I think first it's kind of a hard question to answer since they are not here. The first thing I would ask is how you define gay enough. Like, what's your definition of gay enough? Because that kind of seems like a almost borderline offensive statement in itself. Like, I don't know like what to do with that. But I mean, like, does the drama not satisfy you unless you have like this like openly graphic sex sequence or something? It's not it's not the whenever the characters have sex, it does cut back and forth. It's not like it's showing much of anything. But yeah, I don't know what she's looking for with that. It seems kind of to me like a I don't know. I don't know what to do with that, honestly.
I guess they're just gonna have to watch it and come on the podcast and say.
Honestly, that's almost I think that's almost a little offensive. Like, this is not gay enough for me. All right, well, I think that'll wrap up part 1. We'll be back in a minute talking about the life and death of Colonel Blimp from 1943. So stick around.
Hello, Cinematary listeners. This is Andrew Swafford with an important message during this break in the show. Cinematary would like you to know that we do not want your money, and we don't want to place ads in the show at this time. That's not why we do this. We do it because we enjoy each other's company and because we want to bring you our pure, unadulterated opinions on the world of cinema. However, there are a few things you can do to help out the show that we would greatly appreciate. Firstly, leave us a review on iTunes, preferably a positive one, because the algorithm gods tell us that reviews increase our podcast's exposure. Secondly, send us a tweet at Cinematary, or better yet, send an email to cinematary@yahoo.com so that we can hear from you guys for a change. Maybe you think I'm an idiot for not liking Singing in the Rain, or maybe you have a suggestion of a movie that you really want to hear our opinion on. Regardless, let us know your thoughts, and we'll read them out and respond to them on future episodes of Cinematary. Finally, please share the show with friends and members of your family who you think would enjoy listening to and participating in our film discussions we bring to you guys every week. So to recap, review, send us your thoughts through Twitter and email, and share with your friends and family. We would truly appreciate it. Thanks for listening. Now let's get back to the show.
Episode 169 of Cinematary. This part, Lydia and I, we're gonna go the duo. 2 people.
Just us, we got it.
Jessica's left. We're gonna go with 2 people, and we're gonna start our series on the Archers, Michael Powell and Emmerich Pressburger. We're gonna be leading it off with their 1943, 2-hour and 40-minute film, The Life and Death of Colonel Blimp. Yeah, it's epic. Like we said, it's written, directed, and produced by the Archers. The cast includes Roger Livesey, Deborah Kerr, and Anton Walbrook. The film follows Major General Clive Candy from the Boer War to the Second World War. And the film's title derives from the satirical Colonel Blimp comic strip by David Lowe, but has no connection with the story itself. The comic, they just take the name from the comic strip, and Candy kind of looks like Colonel Blimp at the beginning. Other than that,
I will say I was
no
confused about who Colonel Blimp was. Well, I was like, when is this happening?
Yeah. You assumed it was. I almost thought it was going to be like an Apocalypse Now type situation where it'd be. But anyway. According to the directors, the idea for the film did not come from the newspaper comic, but from a scene cut from their previous film, One of Our Aircraft is Missing, in which an elderly member of the crew tells a younger one, quote, "You don't know what it's like to be old." Powell has stated that the idea was actually suggested by David Lean, then an editor, who, when removing the scene from the film, mentioned that the premise of the conversation was worthy of a film in its own right. Powell wanted Laurence Olivier, who previously appeared in their films 49th Parallel and The Volunteer, to play Clive Candy. However, the Ministry of Information refused to release Olivier, who was serving in the Fleet Air Arm, from active service during World War II. In 1970, Powell recalled the extraordinary discussions he and Pressburger had with the Ministry of Information. Quote, "They said, we don't think you should make this film. We replied, go and fuck yourself. They said, all right, but you can't have Laurence Olivier. You're going to stop us from making it? Oh no, we're not going to stop you. After all, this is a democracy, but we advise you not to make it, and you can't have Laurence Olivier because he's in the Fleet Air Arm, and we're not going to release him to play your Colonel Blimp." Powell wanted Wendy Hiller to play Kerr's parts in the movie, but Hiller pulled out due to pregnancy. Further problems were caused by Prime Minister Winston Churchill, who, prompted by objections from James Grigg, his Secretary of State for War, sent a memo suggesting the production be stopped. Grigg warned that the public's belief in the, quote, blimp conception of the Army officer would be given, quote, a new lease of life. After Ministry of Information and War Office officials had reviewed a rough cut of the film, objections were withdrawn in May of 1943. Churchill's disapproval, though, remained, however, and his insistence on an export ban, much exploited in advertising by British distributors, remained in place until August of that year. At about the time of the premiere, Churchill was said to have confronted Anton Walbrook backstage at the West End Theatre, where he was appearing in the play Watch on the Rhine. Churchill said, "What's this film supposed to mean? I suppose you regard it as good propaganda for Britain." Walbrook reportedly replied that only the English, quote, would have had the courage in the midst of the war to tell the people such unvarnished truth. Churchill remained unconvinced. Although the film is strongly pro-British, it is a satire on the British Army, especially its leadership. It suggests that Britain faced the option of following traditional notions of honorable warfare or to, quote, fight dirty in the face of such an evil enemy as Nazi Germany. There is also a certain similarity between Candy and Churchill, and some historians have suggested that Churchill may have wanted the production stopped because he had mistaken the film for a parody of himself, since he himself had served in the Boer War and the First World War. Churchill's exact reasons remained unclear, but he was acting only on a description of the planned film from his staff, not a viewing of the film himself. The film was shot in 4 months at Denham Film Studios and on location in and around London and at Denton Hall in Yorkshire. Filming was made difficult by the wartime shortages and by Churchill's objections, leading to a ban on the production crew having access to any military personnel or equipment. But they still managed to, quote, find quite a few army vehicles and plenty of uniforms. The story is that they just stole them. Michael Powell once said of the movie that it is, quote, a 100% British film, but it's photographed by a Frenchman, it's written by a Hungarian, the musical score is by a German Jew, the director was English, the man who did the costumes was a Czech. In other words, it was the kind of film that I've always wanted to work on, with a mixed crew of every nationality, no frontiers of any kind. At other times, he also pointed out that the designer was German and the leads included Austrian and Scottish actors. The military advisor for the film was Lieutenant General Sir Douglas Brownrigg, whose own career was rather similar to Candy's, as he had served with distinction in the First World War, was retired after Dunkirk, and then took a senior role in the Home Guard. The film was heavily attacked on release, mainly because of the sympathetic presentation of a German officer, albeit an anti-Nazi one, who is more down-to-earth and realistic than the central British character. The film provoked an extremist pamphlet, The Shame and Disgrace of Colonel Blimp, by right-wing sociologist E.W. and M.M. Robson. In the pamphlet, they called it a highly elaborate, flashy, flabby, and costly film, the most disgraceful production that has ever emanated from a British studio. The film was the fourth most popular movie at the British box office in 1943. Due to the British government's disapproval of the film, it was not released in the United States until 1945, and then in a modified form as The Adventures of Colonel Blimp, or simply Colonel Blimp. The original cut was 163 minutes. It was reduced to an 150-minute version, then later to 90 minutes for television. One of the crucial changes made to the shortened versions was the removal of the film's flashback structure. In 1983, the original cut was restored for a re-release, much to Emmerich Pressburger's delight. Pressburger, as affirmed by his grandson Kevin MacDonald on a DVD feature, considered Blimp the best of his and Powell's works. In 2002, Roger Ebert said, "Rarely does a film give us such a nuanced view of the whole span of a man's life. It is said that the child is father to the man. Colonel Blimp makes poetry out of what the old know, but the young do not guess. The man contains both the father and the child." Scorsese at the time of the re-release said, "Every time I revisit the life and death of Colonel Blimp, it grows, it becomes richer with every passing interval of time, and that's what the film is about after all. It seems to have become more resonant, more moving, more profound. You could say that it's the epic of an ordinary life, and what you retain from this epic is an overpowering sense of warmth and love and friendship, of shared humor and tenderness, and a lasting impression of the most eloquent sadness." On that note, I do agree with that last point by Scorsese. It is a very sad movie. It ranges. It's kind of funny. It says the life and death of Colonel Blimp. I guess spoiler alert. Candy doesn't die. He's still very much alive at the end of the movie.
On the commentary track, Powell's so funny. He's like, audiences always take the title, so literally, he doesn't actually die. Yeah. He just changes and, I don't know, becomes better, I guess. It's a symbolic death.
Yeah. Well, give me, what did you think of this movie? Was this the first time you saw Colonel Blimp?
First time I'd seen Colonel Blimp. We were talking before the podcast, actually, and my first impression of it, just taking it at face value, was just, it's a very British film. It felt very kind of like droll and self-depreciating. But you're right, it does shape up to be really quite affecting, and you feel so bad for Colonel Candy by the end of it.
Yeah. Well, it's one of those, I think that, it was, when I watched it and I kind of finished it, I liked it well enough, but then I started kind of reading interpretations of the movie and reading a lot more about the background, and I grew this appreciation. I read this piece that actually just recently, and Lydia did also, that recently appeared in Reverse Shot about the movie, and it talks about how it kind of messes with time, and I kind of wanted to start there. Okay. Because the movie begins and it's, for lack of a better term, it's present day, where it's kind of confusing because you're following this group of soldiers. It's, right in the midst of World War II, and they have, it's these young soldiers. They want to go off they want to kind of, start fighting Hitler, but the whole mantra is war starts at midnight. And so they all come back to London, and they try to arrest Clive Candy because they're like, we don't need to be, following. Dirty. Yeah, the Nazis aren't fighting the way we are. We need to get on there. We need to, be like them. We can't follow these old traditions. And the soldier makes, I think what sets Candy off, which, leads to him tackling him in this Turkish bath, is that he makes he says something along the lines of, I don't know how you got, these marks. I don't know how you got that, that mustache. And Candy kind of goes, I'll show you how I got these marks, and I'll show you how I got this mustache. And it has this wonderful, this incredible transition where
it's like Candy
jumps
move.
on. Yeah, Candy jumps on top of the young soldier, and they're fighting in the bath, and the camera pans up, and then it sits there for a while, and then it pans a little down, and a young Candy emerges from the bath, and it picks you up in 1902. What Lydia, what did you think of kind of how it transitioned through time? There's a couple instances we can bring up some more examples as we talk, but I'm curious how you thought, what did you think of how, Powell and Pressburger moved a long time without, with a lack of like, I'm thinking of the old movie way where like the calendar. Yeah.
Because the time span of the film covers 40 years, and that's a lot to pack in, even into a little over 2.5 hours. And so two things they do that are really pretty interesting are like the makeup effects on who's the actor?
Roger Livesley. or Livesey.
Roger Livesley, kind of like doing like receding hairlines and gaining weight, and you kind of visibly see him aging. And then also when they have to do these like big time jumps, you go from like 1902 to the First World War to the Second World War, and it's these great sequences of when Candy gets sad, he goes hunting.
Yeah.
And you just bang, and a like trophy taxidermied head appears on his parlor wall. And I guess they also have like a sequence of the scrapbook flipping between World War I and World War II, and like suddenly the pages
like a
stop.
Yeah.
Because something.
Well, and then like, well, I just sorry to interrupt, but also you know, they also have like when somebody dies, you'll see a newspaper clipping of like the formal announcement. You never see them actually die, or you never see them like in a hospital bed or something like that.
Well, they did that with when his wife died, and then like the rest of the scrapbook didn't get filled in. Which is like such good visual storytelling too.
Yes.
And it's way better than just calendar. We're actually getting information out of it too. And we're getting information about the hunting too, because it's like larger and larger, more exotic animals.
Well, there's a lot of that. Powell and Pressburger do a fantastic job of just telling this story in such a visual, cinematic way. Another example I think of is in the 1902 portion when he first when Candy first comes into contact with Theo, who is the Anton Walbrook character, who will come up, who will come up, you know, over and over throughout the rest of the film. You know, they have this 40-year friendship, but the first time they meet each other, they end up getting into a fight and proposing a duel, and they have this duel in this like looks like almost an abandoned gymnasium.
It's a gymnasium.
Yeah.
It's like a training camp or something.
Yeah, and they spent a lot of time setting up and preparing the duel. They spend a lot of time of them like, you know, getting ready and, you know, sharpening, getting the knives ready and picking, you know, what they want to do with their sleeves and all this stuff. And then they stand, you know, there at attention or whatever, and then they start commencing the duel and they start fighting a little bit. But when they start fighting, the camera pans, you know, like way up, and they don't ever show you like what happens with the fight or you know all of that kind of stuff. Instead, they pan out almost, and it cuts to it moves to the carriage outside where the Edith character is, as well as the other friend of Candy's, and you react to the fight not by actually seeing the action. You react by how she's kind of reacting to the whole situation, which is such an interesting way of approaching this kind of, you know, you would assume very important monumental scene in the movie.
No, that sequence is actually really interesting because the fight really isn't that important. I thought all the lead up stuff was really funny, actually, and just kind of like making fun of these aristocratic, pompous like ceremony and rituals.
Yeah, well, yeah, it's just it's making fun of the like
circumstances that this is even happening because it all started because Candy is so pompous and he insulted like an aristocrat, and then the aristocrat has got this other stand-in to duel for him, and it's pretty silly, which I know Edith's character like upbraids him about the head for, like, before it all happens. It's like, you should be ruder.
Well, yeah. Well, I you know, deeply explained that scene because I thought they do that a lot where, you know, and they make the point in the piece that I was referencing earlier, where the way they manipulate time in this movie is very unique to other movies because by the end of it, I think the sadness that we talked about at the beginning that you have for Candy is more, he kind of has this revelation that he's lived, but he at the same time he hasn't lived. You know, it's like he has these moments that he in these ideals that he latches onto and he holds so dear, but the world's constantly changing around him and he's having to loosen those, and kind of the world saying that he has to kind of drop those in order to move on.
Yeah, I think that,
and so I think that's what makes those memories so effective, is because it kind of just glazes over and passes on what you would assume would be such the focal point.
I think the death of Colonel Blimp that actually happens is suddenly realizing the weight of all this time that has gone by. Because the final scene, he's like looking out where his house used to be, because it got destroyed in the Blitz. And it's just like, oh no, and he's talking to Deborah Kerr's character again and like trying to offer like a piece of olive branch to the young guy who attacked him in the Turkish bath.
Yeah.
And it's like,
who is her boyfriend or whatever.
Yeah. And it's kind of like, I hope I was like him like suddenly realized like, oh, that used to be me. And I was too proud to learn anything. And I don't necessarily know if the young boy, like, that's the tragedy, right? Like, that kid's not going to take the dinner or whatever.
Yeah. Well, that's what he says, is that he had a similar situation, and where he talks about in 1902, he had this whole thing happening in Berlin, and he comes home and he gets in trouble by his commanding officer because the commanding officer told him that he shouldn't go to Berlin. At the very end, his commanding officer goes, "Would you like to come to dinner?" And he says, No, I have an engagement. And he was like, "I kind of regret I should have taken that dinner." And that's the tragedy of the film, is that in the Anton Wilbrook character, the Theo makes this point later in the film when he's talking to Candy after he's bumped from appearing on the BBC to talk about Dunkirk, I think. And he says, I think Candy makes it to him as well, where it's like, when we're young, we don't know as much, but we have so much more energy. We're so much more, excited to kind of get into the brush of everything. And when we're older, we have much more understanding. We have all this knowledge, but we're not wanted to use any of it. It's like you've accumulated all this experience and knowledge, and you get to this age where you're not required anymore. Nobody really wants you to use that. And yeah, that's what makes this such a sad movie, because it's just, I think that we come at a odd angle, because we're definitely on the kind of youthful side. We're on the angle where we're kind of the 1902 Candy, where I think that
we got a lot of energy and kind of dumb.
Yeah, we lack the insight of somebody who's been doing something for so long, and I think that we're probably a little cocky, and we think that we know things. But I think that's what's so effective about this movie, is it has this understated yet very poignant observation on life.
I think, like, Candy's character and evolution is really interesting. It's the focal point of the film, but it's also contrasted with like one character. I mean, it's several characters, but it's one actress.
Yeah.
Who doesn't change and evolve at all.
Yeah, let's talk about Deborah Kerr's character. Real quick, I wanted to read a little bit from this essay from the Criterion Collection by Molly Haskell. She's talking about the movie, but she has this part about these couple paragraphs about Deborah Kerr, who plays 3 different roles in this movie. She says, Powell was in love with Kerr when they were making the film, and one feels delicate shadings of chemistry in every scene between her and Powell, surrogate Livesey. Indeed, there's a kind of special surreptitious charge between and among all 3 actors. Powell wrote that in the course of making the film, quote, "I learned from Anton what an artist is. I learned from Roger what a man is. I learned from Deborah what love is." But Kerr, lovely and wistful through with inner strength, deserves special note. Of the subtlety and wisdom of her performance, the shifts in register as she changes persona, too little has been said. Among the many superb writers on this film, almost no one I know of, with the exception of Penelope Andrews in the Huffington Post, has paid much attention to Kerr or to Powell's women in general. Andrew Sarris is another exception, having confessed that one of the reasons he came to appreciate Colonel Blimp, preferring it to even Citizen Kane, was the centrality of a woman and the, quote, redemptive seductive romanticism of the recurring and thus unquenchable love between the Kerr and Livesey characters. Kerr is there to express Powell's ideal, but also to challenge romantic idealism. The downside of which is, of course, that the courtly lovers fail to see their idols whole as having an interior life, as creatures who prick, irritate, and defy even as they love. Candy is a hero, generous, manly, and brave, but like all heroes, he is somewhat obtuse, impervious to the ambiguities of life, baffled by sensibilities that can't be reached by good old British common sense. Women are a foreign planet to him, and as such can remain as opaque and beautiful. Remain an opaque and beautiful mystery. He doesn't quite hear the rumblings of feminist resentment. Which is, and you definitely feel that because in 1902 he meets Edith, the first Deborah Kerr character, and they kind of argue back and forth. You know, she is expressing all of these suffragist kind of notions and challenges him on the kind of, because he makes some point about, you know, a woman's place is at the home, and she definitely challenges him on that. And yeah, I mean, Lydia, what did you think of Kerr's performance and how she's shifting between all the different, the different personas, the different characters?
I think what's actually really interesting about is she didn't necessarily disappear into the three roles, but I think if you weren't paying that close attention on a first watch through, it'd be like easy to miss. And it's kind of incredible how like her costuming and the way they did her hair and her makeup and the way that she acted, like, each character she plays is a different character. So you also then, what am I trying to get at? You kind of get at this idea that maybe Candy is just seeing Kerr in these different women. Yeah. Just a little bit like, and
well, that's what I'm trying to, I'm wondering, like, what did you think, you know, do you see it as this kind of, like Molly Haskell says, like, you know, he's trying to this idealism, or do you think that they are in any way are Powell and Pressburger kind of challenging romantic idealism? Because she, you know, yeah, he meets the first kind of Deborah Kerr character, and then the only reason he marries his wife, who was the second one, is because he thought it was the first one, just because of the striking resemblance. Yeah. And then the third one is this driver who he kind of, you know, she talks about how he picked her out of, you know, these thousands of women or thousands of candidates or whatever,
like 700
candidates. But you know, but you figure out what the reason was. But yeah, I mean, sorry to interrupt, but yeah, you know, do you think that it's idealism, or does it in any way challenge the romantic idealism?
I think it's challenged a little bit because Murdoch, his like Scottish driver from World War One, yes, kind of has this throwaway lines like, "You thought you saw that girl at the movie theater," or to like kind of implying that Candy sees Deborah Kerr everywhere, and so he's like searching for it and maybe just wanting it into being. And also when he's so excited to show off this portrait of the second Deborah Kerr character that he marries to Theo's like, I don't really know, like totally nonplussed.
Because Theo has married the first character, the one that, because Candy, you know, interacts with her and they seem to kind of be an item when in 1902 when he's in Berlin, but then near the end of his stay, Theo is like, oh, I would like, you know, you never see them quote falling in love, but at the end he's like, I was definitely in love with her, and so they kind of go off to get married and do that. And then when Candy gets back, he has this little, and Livesey really does a great job of portraying it. But, you know, he has this moment where he realizes that he was in love with her, and he actually goes to when he gets back, he goes to the theater and they're watching Ulysses, and he goes with her sister.
Yeah, and I think that's poking fun at him, right? Like, he's very sad and disappointed that she wasn't Edith, and it's just kind of like, it's a little bit gentle. Like, I think Powell and Pressburger are very gently being like, what did you expect? I think you're being sentimental and stubborn, because he is, and he couldn't admit to himself that he's taking the sister out because he wanted to date Edith. You know, and it's only until he gets some perspective on life, he's like, oh, that's what I was doing. So I think it is a little bit challenging it. But it is really good casting to have it the same woman, but I don't necessarily think it is. Like, it's not this, like, angelic manifestation thing.
Yeah, it's
That's
not
a little
like,
bit too, like, magical for this movie.
Yeah. The next thing I wanted to ask about is kind of Colonel Blimp as this, life, life following epic. Andrew Sarris, talked about compared it to Citizen Kane. And Citizen Kane is, kind of a similar thing where you follow Charles Foster Kane from his, from his death to, then to life. But pretty much from life to death, you follow Charles Foster Kane. How do you compare, Colonel Blimp to movies of that nature, of these kind of where you follow the character from beginning to end? Do you think that it's effective in hitting all the points of over the lifetime?
Well, I don't actually have a lot of movies like that to compare it to, but I was listening to the commentary track, and this movie actually had a really profound effect on Scorsese's Raging Bull, which is kind of the same, like, young Ray LaMotta the boxer, and then his life and trials, and then old alcoholic. Didn't learn anything. Ray LaMotta. Or LaMotta? Anyway, and I thought that was a really incredible kind of comparison, and just hearing how inspired Scorsese was by these time eclipses. And he talks about how he structures the first boxing match to be like the fencing. He cuts away from the fight. It's all in the preparation and lead up. And so I think when you're doing, my point is, like, when you're doing these long life epic stories, you have to find a way to kind of elide time. And Citizen Kane kind of invented the March of Time newsreel thing, which is now a cliche. And then Powell and Pressburger managed to avoid that in a really clever way. And I think most films maybe don't avoid that slip, but Raging Bull was pretty good.
Yeah. Well, it's just with Colonel Blimp, it's funny because, it's not like you have these, almost portrait moments of the life. It's if you wanted to have the great moments of his life, like on a, in a row of pictures, I think it would be tough to kind of find those. It seems like we're always seeing him in the in-between, because when we pick up with him in 1902, he's just got back from the Boer War. Like it's not like we never watch him actually in battle. And the same, and then we watch him kind of have this whole thing happening in Berlin, and then we're, moving forward to World War I. And in World War I, it's the very end of the war. We catch him at the very last moment. He goes into the convent and has the meal with the nuns, and sees the Deborah Kerr, the second version of her character. And then after that we pick up, and he's getting married to her, and then we pick up again, and it's it's much later. We're always kind of in the in between of we're never in the largest moments of his life. And I think that kind of makes it more interesting, because I think you find that's a much more effective way of telling his story, and being able to understand him more as a character, just because you learn more about people's character in those small moments, in those in-between moments, than you do in the more profound, quote unquote picture moments of somebody's lifetime.
Well, that's where life happens, I guess. It's not necessarily big events. That's pretty good. I like that.
I put on Letterboxd, the young are brash, the old are not needed, in between his life. That's my poetry. So as we kind of wrap up, any closing thoughts on Colonel Blimp, and just kind of some thoughts on how Powell and Pressburger, how their movie making skills as we enter this series about them?
Not a whole lot to say about this, but I think Powell and Pressburger mastered Technicolor just as a format. I've only
it's so
ever
beautiful, this movie.
Seen Red Shoes. But that's a gorgeous movie. But like, Colonel Blimp just looks so good. The palettes are like really striking. He puts like Deborah Kerr in like these red and blues, when she's the Edith Hunter character, and it just pops off the screen, but not like in an obnoxious way. So I'm looking forward to seeing the rest of their films. I think this is going to be one of our most beautiful series.
Yeah, no, I totally agree that the Technicolor use, plus it's in that that good period of like the 40s and 50s. The use, like the color is just so, it's so good. Because when I've been watching late. This is a vastly different, well, not vastly different, but I've been watching late Ozu movies, and he was making movies around this time, and the use of color, there's something much more.
The way they do their palettes is,
yeah,
I don't know if it's cleaner or what, but
well, it's like the colors pop a little bit more. And they're not overbearing, but they feel much more pronounced than just if it was something normal. And I don't know. To me, I really, really like it because it seems like there's much more of a purpose in having that color there. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah, I know exactly what you're saying. So I'm really looking forward to the rest of this.
Yeah. I really liked Colonel Blimp also as, and Lydia, you can chime in also, but I liked it as a war movie. I think, naturally, maybe this is just how I align, personally in my feelings toward war, but I just liked how, there was always this kind of snide, satire to how they portrayed military might. Even at the beginning, these soldiers are coming in, and you has this kind of pulpy big band music, bum 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 bum, when they're, it's that's almost silly. It doesn't make them, it's not like the long deep serious chords of Saving Private Ryan, where it's just very very epic, very dramatic sequence. It's like bum 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 bum, while they're driving into London. I don't know. I thought that I don't think it was ever disrespectful of the military. It wasn't
necessarily glorifying.
But it wasn't.
Though.
Yeah, it just wasn't giving them the level of respect that they wanted. It wasn't disrespectful, but it wasn't giving them the level that they wanted, and I thought that was.
I could see how Churchill might have not been real amused by that.
Exactly.
During the height of World War II.
And that just struck out. That just kind of poked at it to me in a time when, especially when it comes to our war movies that we're getting today, you get stuff like American Sniper and Thank You for Your Service and stuff like that, which seems almost more like
it's like extreme jingoism, sort of.
And so it's just.
And this wasn't what this was.
No. This is a really smart movie. No, I really liked it. I'm very, very excited to continue on with the movies of the Archers. Because I wasn't sure about this one. We started out with the long 2 hour and 44 minute, war epic. But I'll say this: if you haven't seen Colonel Blimp and I think that if the running time kind of scares you away, I really would recommend it. I think this is
it goes by pretty quick. You don't really notice
I 100% agree. I stopped at one point just to get something to eat, and I had an hour left or something. I was like, oh, once they get to once they kind of pick up with the young Clive Candy storyline, it kind of picks up, and you forget really how what the runtime is. But no, I would really recommend this if you can. It's on Filmstruck. I really liked it.
I will say it held my attention way better than Predator, which is a much shorter movie and put me to sleep.
See, there you go. 40s.
Because those are definitely comparable.
40s 2 hour and 44 minute war epics. British, war epics. Much better than Arnold Schwarzenegger Vietnam homage action movies. All right. Well, yeah, that'll wrap up this episode of Cinematary. You can find us on social media. We're at Facebook at facebook.com/Cinematary, at Twitter at handle @Cinematary, and on Letterboxd at letterboxd.com/Cinematary, where we post all the movies that we talked about in this episode. Next week, we will be continuing our series on The Archers with 1946, A Matter of Life and Death. So
lots of lives and deaths.
Lots of lives and deaths. We're getting all the lives and deaths out early. If you want to see the other movies that we're going to be talking about in the series, we have them on cinematary.com. You can check out the rest of the picks
homepage
on the homepage. But yeah, I don't think we have anything else to plug. So yeah, I guess thank you guys for listening, and we will see you next week.